Guys, today a Lauma build guide. As I said in a video I made a couple days ago, I think Lauma is a very strong character, so today a complete guide on how you should build her in terms of artifacts and weapons. Also, something about the value of her constellations and whether you should go for them instead of the signature weapon, for example. Do you want to take your internet browsing experience to the next level? I got something to show you. Opera GX, who I thank for sponsoring this video. Opera GX is a very unique web browser, which I think fits the preferences of many gaming and anime fans out there. The main feature it has for this purpose is that you can install many mods made by users, which will personalize your browsing experience. My favorite are the Genshin Impact ones. There are so many of them. They're very easy to install as well, and once you do that, you will get a themed background as well as sound effects completely for free. There is more! Opera GX has a very cool pop-out feature that puts the video you're watching in a miniature, which stays on top of every window of your computer. So it's an amazing way to multitask if you're, for example, watching an anime, but you also need to do something else. If you want to switch to Opera GX, it will be very easy also. The browser has a direct import setting, with which you can transfer browsing history, cookies, and bookmarks from a different browser in just a couple clicks. So yeah, if you're an anime and games fans like me, and I'm sure you are if you're watching these Genshin Impact videos, make sure to give Opera GX a try, free to download through the link in the descriptions below. First of all, in terms of leveling her, aside from the many materials you can get as of right now, since they are in Nodcry, you'll be able to prepare the Dendro gemstones and the weekly boss materials you can farm from the Natlan weekly boss. About her artifacts, in terms of stats, Lauma is basically of the same archetype as Nahida, because she benefits massively from Elemental Mastery, both in terms of damage output and for her supportive capabilities. However, unlike Nahida, she doesn't care about Dendro damage bonus, because her main damage source is of Lunar Bloom type, so a transformative reaction that doesn't benefit from damage bonus effects. Despite that, she still cares about crit, because Lunar Bloom can crit. So it brings the question of what main stat your circlet should have. When it comes to her damage, it's similar, although Elemental Mastery becomes more important on teams where she's triggering normal Bloom reactions, like on Nilo Bloom teams. Still, even on other teams like Hyperbloom, if she's not getting many external Elemental Mastery buffs from others, the Elemental Mastery main stat can scale pretty nicely regardless. When you consider her supportive effect, which increases Bloom damage for the team through her burst based on her Elemental Mastery, obviously this stat becomes even more relevant. This is more important on teams where Bloom damage makes up for a larger portion of the team damage. So again, Nilo Bloom teams, but it's pretty important everywhere. Now, moving to her energy requirement situation, Lauma is unfortunately not a great particle generator. Her skill attacks opponents every 2 seconds, and on those attacks it has a 66% chance to generate a single particle. So it's not optimal, because on top of being inconsistent, on teams where she's played off-field, she won't even be able to get those particles directly. What's good, however, is that this skill can have full uptime, because its cooldown is of just 12 seconds, and also that on several of her teams she'll be paired with a second Dendro character that can battery her. Overall, in the teams I've calculated, I've estimated her to need around 150 energy recharge across the board, assuming she uses her burst every 20 seconds. I'm pointing this out because technically her burst has a 15 seconds long cooldown, and if you wanted to use it every 15 seconds, the energy requirements will go up significantly. Honestly, since Lauma is a character that wants Elemental Mastery main stats and crit substats, she is really hard to build, because that's the mix of the most rare stats in the game, odds-wise. Adding energy recharge substats into the mix, of course, makes things even worse, and so I wouldn't blame you if you opted for an energy recharge Sans, for example. That will get rid of a lot of issues. Now, artifact sets-wise, she's kind of peculiar, because I don't think she has a specific best-in-slot set. On teams where there is no second Nodcry character, but where somebody else can hold a supportive set like Deepwood, I calculated her with Gilded Dreams, so the set that will give her the most Elemental Mastery. On teams where there is a second Nodcry character, you can either put her on the supportive Nodcry set that gives 120 Elemental Mastery to the whole team, or Deepwood. Typically, you want both of these sets to be held by someone in your team in this scenario. On teams where there is a second not-cry character, but at the same time 2 characters that can already hold Deep Food and the not-cry set respectively, you can still give her Gilded, or alternatively even the not-cry DPS set, maybe. The description of the set states that a Moon Glare reactions must be activated while the holder is on field for him to get buffs for 3.5 seconds. With Lauma on team, normal blooms will count as Moon Glare, so she should in theory be able to get that effect consistently active before she uses her skill. In this case, for this specific scenario, the set will be better than Gilded Dreams. Now let's talk about the weapons, but first let me remind you that if you enjoy my content but you haven't subbed yet, please consider doing so because it really makes me notice your support. So, as a Catalyst character, Lauma has many elemental mastery based options to pick from. A fun one will be the Sacrificial Fragment, because it gives her elemental mastery and can also reset the cooldown of her very powerful skill, allowing her to use it more frequently. However, a problem with this is that her skill needs 3 stacks of Verdant Dews to be used at full power. These stacks are generated through blooms, but with a cooldown of 2.5 seconds each, so it takes 7 seconds and a half to get 3 stacks. Even with this in mind, Fragment is still useful, but definitely less than if you could use 2 powerful skills in a row. The true best free-to-play options should be the catalysts that are coming out in 6.0, specifically the event one that gives her an insane 405 elemental mastery consistently, and the craftable one that gives her 221 elemental mastery and also bloom and lunar bloom reaction bonuses. In my calcs, I initially put her on the second one, but switching things up made me realize that giving her the first one, which gives her more elemental mastery as opposed to reaction bonus, and giving the second one to somebody that can trigger more bloom reactions is better. This is because Lauma doesn't trigger many blooms herself, and so the passive of the reaction bonus catalyst is a bit wasted on her, even if it also increases her lunar damage, so the skill damage. Meanwhile, her signature weapon is kind of a mix of both of these free-to-play catalysts. It will give her a lot of elemental mastery while also giving reaction damage bonuses, but instead of just giving them to her, it will do that for the whole team. Naturally, it's the best in slot option, but I wouldn't say it's a huge priority. Even on teams like Nilu Bloom, where the bloom damage is insanely important, the weapon is just a small team damage increase. This increase gets smaller on teams like Hyper Bloom, where the damage output is a bit more diversified, and generally it gets pretty minuscule if the bloom damage just constitutes a minor part of the team output. Lastly, about their constellations, they're very peculiar. Specifically, the constellation one is not a direct damage increase for her or the team, but rather makes her an healer. With a cooldown of 2 seconds, when a lunar bloom is triggered by the team, the active character will receive healing based on 500% of her elemental mastery. This point alone demands an explanation, because in case you don't know, normal blooms created by the team don't deal lunar bloom damage. However, the generation of the normal bloom itself still counts as lunar bloom reaction, since that's what Lauma enables through one of her passives. These lunar blooms will create the Verdant Dew, but for the rest just deal normal damage. From what I understand, they will also trigger the Constellation 1. The effect that comes with it makes Lauma a pretty powerful healer, strong enough that even on Nilu Bloom compositions, you shouldn't need a second healer on the team. This brings benefits for a lot of our teams. For example, on compositions where you had to run somebody like Baiju or Yao Yao, you can replace them with Nahida, who's just better in terms of rotations and damage. On Kokomi teams, it allows you to build Kokomi with full elemental mastery, rather than compromise for HP stats to increase her healing. On Furina teams, her healing means more fanfare, so of course that's pretty nice. I will definitely say that the Constellation 1 is more important than the signature weapon as a whole, because it just adds a second dimension to her kit, that in the worst case scenario will just make the team more comfy, and in the best case scenario it's kind of a role consolidation, so of support and healing that will translate to a damage increase for the team. And with this, I'm done for today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, also go check Opera GX through the links in the description below, and also go check the latest build guide video I made on Flames. Bye bye.